I believe that to solve this problem, that the gap of knowledge, the gap of awareness is by doing training, and more training.
Welcome everyone to the Industrial Security Podcast. My name is Nate Nelson. I'm here with Andrew Ginter, the Vice President of Industrial Security at Waterfall Security Solutions. He's going to introduce the subject and the guest of today's show. Andrew, how are you today?
I'm very well, thank you, Nate. Our guest today is Ofir Hason. He is the CEO and co-founder of CyberGym. And our topic is training. And in particular, we're going to talk about how to practice being under attack.
Okay, then without further ado, here's you and Ofir.
Hello, Ofir, and thank you for joining us. Before we get started, can you say a few words about yourself and about your background in this space, and about CyberGym as well?
Sure. Hello, Andrew. Hello, everyone. Thank you for having this opportunity to talk to you a little bit about training and cybersecurity in the industrial control system sector. Just in a nutshell about myself, I founded CyberGym about 7 years ago together with the Israeli Electric Corporation. And before that, I worked for the Israeli government in an agency called NISA, stands for National Information Security Authority. It's actually the regulator in Israel for a long, long time for critical infrastructure, for protecting critical infrastructures in Israel. Before that, I worked for two startups in the cybersecurity domain, and I served the Israeli army before that for a little bit more than 4 years doing cyber intelligence. So it's easy to say that I spent the last 15, 20 years doing cybersecurity in a lot of subdomains: offensive, defensive, regulator, technology. So I believe I have a lot of experience in those subdomains and aspects, and I saw a lot of things from different angles in the cyber area. Well, a little bit about CyberGym. CyberGym is a company that decided to focus on the human factor. 7 years ago, when we decided to go ahead with CyberGym and incorporated this company, we decided that we want to focus on the human factor. Our experience, like I said, in a different domains, show that the human factor is the weakest link in the chain. Every successful cyber attack around the world in the last few years, more than a decade now, was successful because of a failure in the human factor part, and not necessarily all the time because of a failure in the technology, in the defense technology. So we decided to go and build CyberGym as a training organization and focus on the human factor in those organizations. And that's what we're doing since then. That's what CyberGym is doing for the last 7 years.
So our topic is training. When you look at an organization, that needs to do better cybersecurity, what kind of gaps do you see there?
There are a lot of gaps, but the main ones that we can see is with the workforce across the board, across the organizations. We see people that have poor awareness level of the recent attacks around the world. They are not aware of the risk that their organization is facing. They don't know, even if they believe in the risk, or even if they are aware of what happened around the world, they don't know what to do about it. And I will give you a few examples. Especially in the industrial control system sector, in the energy sector, the transportation sector, oil and gas sector. If you will go to an engineer, a workstation engineer, electricity engineer, operational engineers, and you will ask him, "Oh, you know what happened in Florida a few months back?" And he will say, "I have no idea." In most cases, they will have no idea what happened in Florida in that water facility, or in other places around the world with similar case studies in their organization. Their awareness level for recent attacks around the world is very, very low in most cases. So if you're not aware of the problem, how can you fix the problem? How can you deal with the problem that you're not aware of? So one huge gap is their awareness of this workforce around the world in similar sectors and different sectors. And the second thing is that some cases we even saw that the engineers cannot believe that we can damage their system using a cyber attack. In most cases, they will say, listen, it cannot happen. It may be a misfunction, it may be a failure in the mechanical elements, but not because of a cyber attack. In most cases, they will say, listen, show me. I don't believe you. It cannot happen. These kind of gaps are, in most cases, even worse than not knowing. And the last part, let's assume that they know what's going on. Let's assume that they accept that there is a risk. If we found out that even so, they don't know what to do with it. They say, listen, okay, now I know that there is a problem. You showed me, you proved it, whatever, right? Now what I'm going to do with it? How do you expect me to protect my system against those hacker groups around the world, those states that are trying to attack me? And those gaps, we need to find a way to mitigate them by training the organizations, training those people, show them those case studies, show them the risk and demonstrate the risks, and not just telling them about it.
So what Ofir was talking about there was having employees really understand organizational risk. Now that's something that I can understand how it's important generally speaking, but why is it important that every employee at a location needs to really understand these big picture things? Is it really necessary that even low-level employees understand? Are we talking about phishing here, like awareness of phishing, or does everybody in an organization really need to understand the full breadth of the risks that everybody else is facing?
It's a good question. I think there's a couple of answers. One is, phishing's involved. Everyone is a potential target for phishing, especially in sort of high value targets. Every employee in a high value target is a potential threat vector, where attacks can come in through the employee. Sort of more specifically in the industrial space, we also need to understand information flows. I mean, every piece of information could be an attack. Every USB drive is a threat. Every laptop or tablet that we carry into the site from the outside, from being connected to the IT network or the internet, is a threat. People need to understand this. They need to understand that their cell phones put systems at risk if they connect them. So this is all basic awareness. And I guess the second thing, it's a more specialized audience, but people responsible kind of need to be understanding how under attack we are. I mean, in the last 6 months, we've had 2, maybe 3 sort of historic attacks. SolarWinds targeted, affected, we're estimating 17 or 18,000 organizations, and specifically target a couple of hundred of these, and extracted who knows what kind of espionage from them, with potential reaching into OT as well. There's a lot of OT inspection going on. The pipeline attack recently was historic. It shut down U.S. critical infrastructure for a week. This is the first time a cyber attack has done that, has had a material impact on critical infrastructure. In between, there was an attack on the Pulse VPN servers. There was 0 days exploited. The Chinese were accused of getting in and compromising, I don't know how many hundreds or thousands of devices, bypassing their two-factor authentication. And so people need to be aware that it's not just the mundane carrying USB drives around, but there's some very sophisticated threats out there. And, this is something we need to take seriously. So that's a little surprising to me. People generally have been talking about cybersecurity for industrial sites for over a decade. What's going on here? What do you see in the industry?
You're right, Andrew. Organizations and people in the media is covering cybersecurity for a few decades now in the IT world, and a little bit more than a decade in the industrial control systems. But things takes a lot of time to implement in organizations around the world. We started from information security in the banks, in the IT environments, IT organizations, websites, and so on. A few decades ago, we just started a little bit more than a decade now talking on cybersecurity and not on information security, cybersecurity for industrial control systems. It takes a long time to implement the knowledge, the threat, the risks for cyber attacks in these sectors, in those organizations, and it's going to take a little bit more than a decade that we just passed to succeed and to explain to all organizations in the industrial control system, or not all of them, but most of them, about the cyber threat and the cyber attack. It's a process. This process, it just started, like you said, a few years back, and the learning curve is very, very long. Those organizations, they are not technology savvy. They are not changing their technologies every day, like in the IT world. Most cases, you will see technologies for 20, 25, 35 years. They are not replacing their firewalls or their PCs or their laptops every other day, like in the IT world. And the same goes to the security elements and the security products that they are installing. Those things are going to take a while. Those are going to take some time, and I believe that we are in the middle, maybe not in the middle, but we are in the start of the learning curve of those organizations to be more aware and more proactive against the cyber threat and the cyber risks.
Targeted ransomware has emerged as the pervasive cyber threat to manufacturing operations. In 2020, all plant downtime due to cyber attacks was because of targeted ransomware. This is in spite of the IEC 62443 security design at these plants. A new ebook from Waterfall Security Solutions looks at targeted ransomware and manufacturing systems in detail. In the book, Dr. Jesus Molina concludes that a big part of the problem is incorrect classification. We need to distinguish business-critical IT systems from operations-critical OT systems. Once we have identified our systems correctly, Dr. Molina looks at what to add to the 62443 style defenses. It turns out we can enjoy the benefits of modern, connected automation without suffering the risks that come from connected automation. To understand 2020's lessons and explore modern solutions, please download the new ebook. You can find it at the Waterfall Security website in the White Papers area under the Resources menu.
So based on what Ofir had said there, it sounds like a lot of industries, organizations are still early on in the learning process when it comes to really grasping cyber risk in ICS. Andrew, in your experience working across industries, observing what various kinds of places do, have you noticed that certain domains, certain kinds of industries are a little bit faster to figuring out the problems than others, and maybe why that would be the case?
That's a tricky question. Let me give you sort of a complicated answer. To start with, there's great variation within any industry. When I wrote my black book, Secure Operations Technology, I documented what the world's most secure industrial sites did. And I had examples from every industry in every geography. There's leaders everywhere. But the vast bulk of people sort of, aren't leaders. They're in a sense, they're following. But your question was industries. The one industry that has a really clear understanding of cyber risk and, sort of led the charge and still leads the charge on cyber risk mitigation is nuclear generation worldwide. Certainly the nukes in the developed world are way ahead cyber-wise. I have less data on developing nations, but, they tend to be high-profile installations in those geographies, and so I'm certainly hoping they're very aware of risk. So that's industries. Geographies, I see more variation among geographies than I see among industries. South Korea, Israel, Singapore are very much leaders in cyber risk and in terms of addressing cyber risk. In terms of security, which is which is different from risk. The North American power sector is probably way ahead security-wise because they have the NERC-CIP regulations that demand that they do certain things security-wise. I'm not sure I'd say that the average North American power plant is way ahead risk-wise. They're ahead security-wise because they have to do this stuff. In terms of understanding the risk and appreciating the risk, I don't know. The one industry I would say worldwide that has sort of awakened to risk and is taking it very seriously is the rails industry. Worldwide, most rails businesses don't have cybersecurity regulations they have to follow. But the industry as a whole has sort of awakened to risk and said, oh, shoot, we have a whole crapload of safety critical systems, and it's all interconnected, and it's all becoming more automated. We're in trouble. And so they are developing their own standards, their own best practice guidance, even without the government telling them they have to do this. But worldwide, they've sort of jumped on this and said, we have to fix this. And there's an enormous amount of activity in the space of dealing with cyber risk in the rails space going on right now.
So, Andrew, if I could paraphrase what you're saying, basically, there are various leaders, specific leaders in specific areas of the world, specific industries. But in general, most industries, most folks are still in the early stages. They're still a little bit behind. That's right. Awareness of risk tends to be comparatively low in most industries in most of the world. So I agree completely with Ofir's summary there. So given that, that problem, given the state of the industry, what does the industry need? How do we solve this problem? How do you solve this problem?
I believe that to solve this problem, that the gap of knowledge, the gap of awareness is by doing training and more training. And to do this training, we developed this not developed, but we adopted a military approach, military methods that we took from the Israeli military and other militaries around the world, that it works for centuries now, how to train the workforce, how to train the soldiers. Could be the simple ones and the commanders and the very high-rank commanders in the military, how to train them effectively against their threats, their enemies' weapons, and so on. The same goes to the cyber world, but without, real weapons, blood, and fights. But actually to do that based on computers, based on technologies, based on real facilities, but actually to see and to face real cyber attacks on real technologies against real hackers in our facilities around the world. This is what CyberGym is offering. But also to customize those trainings and those, I would say, level of trainings and technologies to the level of the organizations or the level of the workforce that you're training. I will give you an example from another world, from another domain, a boxing match, right? A cyber attack on your organization, you can compare that to a championship fight. You don't want to get into a boxing match without any training, without meeting any opponent, any fighter, another fighter before that. You want to get into the championship fight when you're ready, when you've been trained for the last few months, when you got punched and you got trained against the best fighters around the world just before you stepping into the championship fight. And a championship fight, either you're going to lose the championship or you're going to win it. Same goes to a comprehensive cyber attacks on your organization. Either you're going to lose your organizations and that the hackers will succeed, or you're going to win and you live another day and continue running your organization. It's simple as that. And this is what we're offering based on the methods that we took from other militaries around the world, successful methods being approved around the world for the last centuries. And we combine that with the cyber world, with organizations, with the civilian organizations and critical infrastructures around the world. We combine those two elements, the methods and the cyber world, and we created, I believe, the most effective and unique platform for organizations, group of employees, and not individuals. I believe that will give us the solution to increase the resilience of the industrial control system organization.
I know that a lot of other training organizations, they'll have test beds, they'll have equipment for the students to practice on. Do you have facilities like this as well?
Well, we have facilities, and CyberGym worked very hard in the last 7 years to develop a method that allowed us to mimic, to duplicate most of the elements of the technologies that organizations are using, either the PLCs, the HMIs, the different protocols, in our own environment, which allowed the organizations to come and to see similar environment like they have in their own organization, similar environment, an offline facility, which allow them to train based on the same technologies that you're familiar with. Imagine that you step into our facility and you feel like you are in your own facility, but it's a training facility with the technologies that we implemented. And on top of it, we added our own applications, softwares, which allowed us to train you on the scenarios, attacks, and case studies that you're going to choose. Imagine that you step into your facility, to our training facilities, and you see your own technologies, your own HMIs, your own processes, your own PLCs. But then you can train against the case studies that happen in Florida and the water facility, or the black energy in Ukraine, or Stuxnet in Iran, or any other case study that you saw and you're aware of around the world. That's the uniquenesses. That's where CyberGym brings the capabilities and the skills and the uniquenesses as well.
So the topic of the podcast here is training the organization, but so far what you've talked about sounds like training the individual to use tools in their environment. What does training the organization mean?
Imagine that you have a facility and you want to train everyone. When I say everyone, I mean everyone from A to Z. So you need to have a facility that mimic and duplicate the environment, and not just the technology environment, but the organizational environment, which means that when I'm sitting down together with, let's assume with you, Andrew, and I'm sitting down together and we are planning the training, we will sit down and say, listen, I want to participate in this training. I want the board members to participate in this training, the management, maybe some general employees, a secretary, or maybe an IT organization, IT expert or cybersecurity expert. We will build a team that will participate in this training, and not just the techie guys and not just the cybersecurity guys. Once we decided who is the team which is going to be trained, we're going to build a plan. We're going to build the training itself using the facility, using our own softwares, like I said, that we develop, and we will customize this training to this group of people as part of the organization. Now, once we did this training is going to be a part, just a piece of a whole puzzle of different training sessions that we're going to do around the organization, all around the organization in different aspects. For example, so this training that I just mentioned, whatever training is going to be, right? It will be part of a program for the whole organization, for different groups to be trained and to work as a group, as an organic group, not just the technology one, but also the managers. So the managers can make decisions based on what the IT guys will tell them, based on what they see in the systems, based on knowledge or information or intelligence that they're getting from the internet. And then we will see the dynamic between them and the IT guys, and orders what to do next. The facility is based on technology, but it's not just technology. It's for the whole group.
So that sounds great in theory. In practice, how does this work? I mean, the customer brings you in, you do a bunch of stuff. What happens then? How does the organization react?
Yeah, well, Andrew, it's amazing to see how the organization is react. And when I say organizations, I mean different people in the organization. Some people in the organization will react perfect in their domain, in their responsibility, but they will have no idea what to do except of that, what to do beyond their responsibility and their small part in this big puzzle. And some of them will have no idea what to do because this is the first time that they see or facing a real cyber attack on their similar technology. And you know what? I can give you a few examples that we had in the past, and we had quite a lot of examples. Some of them are very good, and some of them are quite embarrassing. And you know, with a very, very known scenarios, like let's take, for example, a ransom attack on an IT environment, threatening to spread to the industrial control system, right? We are talking about the industrial control system in this session. And when we started with the ransom attack, of course, everything was coordinated with the training manager from the organization side, and we started this ransom attack, and we penetrated the network, the IT network. We located a few vulnerabilities. We had some foothold in different places in the network, and then we started the ransom itself. Of course, with a publication in the media, in the social media, of course, with a few emails, with a few phone calls, and suddenly the organization, well, the IT guy is starting to work on his part, but the PR guy from the organization has no idea what to say to the media. The legal department, it's the first time that they see it. They have no idea what is the regulation surrounding this kind of attacks. Of course, GDPR was, of course, a part of it. The guys from the management, the board members, wanted to see what is the exposure, what is the risk on the organization. No idea. And then, very interesting thing happened in this specific example. No one asked what's going to happen with the industrial control system. Who is protecting the critical processes in the organization, the power station, the electricity manufacturing, and no one asked about it. And when we stopped as part of the interactive, and again, an example to show you how it's important to do it as a group, as an organization, and not an individual. When we ask, as the mentors of this training, do you know that your critical processes are the industrial control systems and not the website and not the email system? Did anyone check if they are exposed to the same ransom attack that you are having right now? And, you know, everyone looked one on the other and said, no, I didn't, not me. So no one actually had in mind that the critical processes that it's been defined by the organization, it's not the one that they are protecting right now. Not the IT manager, not the cybersecurity guys, not even the response team that, you know, is outsourced and came from outside, not the mid managers, and definitely not the board members. And this is an example to show you how important it is to do it as a group, to do it as a team, as an organization, and not as an individual.
So, Andrew, I've heard about some pretty cool cyber attack simulators before. It sounds like what CyberGym do involves a lot of different systems, different levels for different folks in an organization, because as he's saying, you're training the whole organization at once. So maybe the engineers are looking at emulated machines, but the legal team is, you know, doing some more like role-playing tabletop thing, a little bit of something for everyone.
That's right. And, you know, I think one of the points that Ofir made here is that when you have sort of enough detail in your training environment for everyone, it sort of highlights some of the problems. The engineers are looking at their virtual PLCs and their virtual control systems and trying to figure out, are we under attack at all? The IT people are looking at their IT systems and trying to figure out how much trouble they're in. The lawyers are scratching their heads. I think one of the things that was called out here is that when you've got silos like this in an organization with sort of the walls too high, That's something that has to be called out in training like this. And, people need to figure out who else in the organization they need to talk to. The legal team might have figured incident response is the IT team's problem. The IT team is heads down trying to figure out how much damage has been done to the assets that are their responsibility without remembering to notify OT that, hey, heads up, you might be in trouble too. So, it sounds like if you've got enough detail in each of the pieces, it kind of highlights how you might have sort of organizational problems that need addressing. So that was an interesting insight for me.
Although when it comes to detail, it occurs to me that from CyberGym's perspective, arranging these simulations and in all their detail must take forever. Did you get to talk to Ofir about that?
I didn't ask him that question specifically, but I had the clear impression from talking to him that, they've done this a lot. They have ways to do this. They have a toolkit that lets them assemble these scenarios very quickly. So I don't think that's a showstopper here. Is there anything else you wanted to cover before we let you go?
Yes, one very, very important thing that I would like to emphasize to our counterparts around the world, to our organizations around the world, is that the element of collaboration, the importance of collaboration between different organizations, doesn't matter if it's in the same sector or across the sectors, is crucial for the success. The hackers are collaborating between themselves. The hacker organizations even talk one each other and share source codes and attacks and vulnerabilities one in each other. We need to do the same. Regardless the sectors, regardless the geographics, we need to train together so we will be able to protect ourselves together. We need to share information so we can be ahead of the curve with the hackers. We need to be very transparent of what we know, of course, under the limitation of what we can share as commercial organizations. But if we can share, and as much as we can share with our counterparts around the world, with other organizations around the world, that will give us a huge advantage. Because then we will be a little bit one step before them, because we share, because we learn one from each other, and we can implement the lesson learns and the insights from one and each other.
Thanks for joining us, Ofir. This has been interesting. Before we let you go, is there a thought that you'd like to leave with our listeners?
Sure, Andrew. Thank you very much. It was my pleasure. I would like to emphasize it's very important for organizations that they cannot sit back and think that they all fully covered because they implemented a firewall or an antivirus or whatever. It's very important for them to fully understand that the landscape of the cybersecurity is all the time evolving, and it's very important to continue and stay up to date, continue and train themselves, continue and educate their employees and their workforce about what's going on around the world. Today's threat is not the one that we had before COVID-19 or the one that we will have a year from now. We need to continue and train and educate our workforce as part of the organization and not sit back and say, we did whatever we did the training this year, it's more than enough. No, it has to be a continuous effort. Thank you very much, Andrew, for this opportunity.
Andrew, that was you and Ofir. Do you have anything to close us out with?
Yeah, so a thought here. Ofir used a boxing analogy early in the interview. I practiced Tung Sudo karate for a long time. I remember my instructor, Grandmaster Carl Tate, would, he used a boxing analogy as well. He said, look, people, the difference in the boxing world between an amateur and a professional is 7 punches. You hit an amateur and he goes down. You hit a professional and he hits you back. And so, the analogy here that I heard was, look, we need to train our organization. We need to put them under attack so that they can learn how to respond. Because we cannot afford to have an organization that the first time they get hit with a real cyber attack just goes down. We've got to be able to take that first hit, respond, react, keep going, possibly even take a second and a third hit and be able to survive. And the way to do that is training, and not just of individual teams, but of the entire organization. So that was the point I took away.
All right. Thanks to Ofir Hason for speaking with you, Andrew. And as always, Andrew, thank you for speaking with me.
Always a pleasure. Thank you, Nate.
This has been the Industrial Security Podcast from Waterfall. Thanks to everyone out there listening.